This, ladies and gentlemen, is a tier list of characters from various media franchises I found online. This isn't mine, I grabbed it off tiermaker.com. It looks normal on the surface, but the more you stare, the more you can't shake the feeling that something is a little off. The ratio of men to women here is a little skewed, understatement of the year, with seemingly random entries thrown in with no rhyme or reason. Raven's at the very top. Zelda, Widowmaker. Oh, there's that Tifa girl that I didn't know about. Remember her? I didn't. Some Sonic characters, some Simpsons characters. Most of the entries here seem to be adults, but there's a few towards the bottom. Definitely not. And the top entry, Raven, it's Teen Titans, right? I assume. In any case, it's a nice list. Totally innocent, right? Rule 34 states, if it exists, there is corn of it. The internet is a wild west, where people can express who they are in an unfiltered capacity. Inevitably, though, this leads to the absolute pandemonium of free sexual expression. Don't get me wrong, that's like my entire channel. Free sexual expression with only a few caveats. You know, there's just a few lines that we don't cross.
Look!
Regardless, I find it all so fascinating. You know, you wouldn't be able to talk about penises for 45 minutes if you didn't find it at least a little interesting. Rule 34 encompasses everything that exists on the internet. It pushes the boundaries of what's even possible. If it exists, you will find a version of it with a penis or a pussy or both. Oh, you mean like different TV, video game characters? No, I'm talking about pizza, the Michelin Man, pine trees, the Pixar lamp, galaxies. You name it, there's someone trying to put their duck in it. Oh, and I should mention before we get started, I will be using the term Rule 34 and hentai interchangeably in this video. I recognize they're really two different things, but I'm talking about animated corn in general. You know, for the purposes of not getting this video, I will be referring to it as Rule 34 or just 34. If you make a comment about it, I'd recommend you use Rule 34, so YouTube doesn't shadow ban your comment. I've seen that happen a lot recently. Anyway, the exact origin of this principle is debated, but numerous sources point to an early 2000s webcomic captioned, Rule 34, there is corn of it, no exceptions. The comic was drawn by artist Tango Sari to depict his shock at seeing pornography of the classic comic Calvin and Hobbes. Fitting that something so depraved and far-reaching originated from something so wholesome. According to Wikipedia, the comic faded into obscurity, but the caption instantly became popular on the internet. Since then, the phrase has been adapted into different synecdoche versions, and has even been used as a verb. Just Rule 34 it, bro. I guess. A list of the rules of the internet created on the website 4chan includes Rule 34 within a list of similar tongue-in-cheek maxims, such as Rule 63. For every given character, a gender-bent version exists. Yes, as you may have guessed, Rule 34 is just one of many internet rules. The lists differ depending on what your source is, but between all iterations, most of them are just pretty goofy, and there aren't actually rules, more so just principles of the internet, things you're gonna run into. Universal truths, I guess. The list that I found does have some standouts. Rule 18, everything that can be labeled can be hated. Rule 24, every repost is always a repost of a repost. Rule 29, on the internet, all girls are men, and all kids are undercover FBI agents. Rule 47, the poll is always closed. And my favorite, Rule 22, copy pasta is made to ruin every last bit of originality. Of course, there's also Rule 23, copy pasta is made to ruin every last bit of originality. It all feels very 4chan, which makes sense, because everything in existence originates from 4chan.
Bazinga!
Another quote from the Wikipedia. As one of the first major anonymous online communities, 4chan created a free-for-all space to share any content. Coupled with a young male-dominated user base, the site became a hotbed for turning Rule 34 from an inside joke into a reality through sheer willpower and dedication. A quick note about one of the most basic arguments against Rule 34, the hypersexualization of women. I don't think this is necessarily true for one key reason. If you've taken more than a surface level look into Rule 34, you'll find that this community takes the idea of gender and sexuality and bends it further than you ever thought possible. In the words of Syndrome, when everyone is sexualized,
no one will be.
That was, dramatic, but it was partly true. In terms of numbers, raw data, in the survey of over 4,000 Americans' sexual fantasies that was conducted for the book Tell Me What You Want, one of the things the writer asked people was whether they had ever fantasized about cartoon or anime characters. What they found was that 27% of participants said this was something they had ever fantasized about before, with 4% saying it was something they fantasize about often. 12% of heterosexual women have had this fantasy before, with 1% saying it's often. 27% of heterosexual men have had this fantasy before, with 3% saying it's often. 26% of lesbian and bisexual women have before, with 4.5% saying often. And a whopping 39% of gay and bisexual men have had this fantasy before, with 8% saying often. So it is undeniably popular and seemingly a little more popular among gay men. This kinda makes sense if you've been around Rule 34 before. A lot of it, almost the majority I'd say, is gay. But what makes it so popular? Are we humans just inherently horny creatures? Or are we just incredibly, seismically bored? While I do think that pure boredom is genuinely a part of this, there's a few reasons that might be able to better explain our addiction. Number 1. Novelty and taboo. Rule 34 content often involves familiar characters in unfamiliar, taboo situations. This element of surprise and transgression can be arousing for some. People do like exciting and new things, and we especially love to feel like we're breaking the rules a bit. Number 2. Parasocial interaction. Fans may develop intense emotional attachments to fictional characters, leading to a desire for more intimate content. Rule 34 provides an outlet for those parasocial desires. 3. Remix culture. 34 can be seen as an extension of internet remix culture, where fans reinterpret and transform existing media to express their own interests and perspectives. Creating sexualized fan works is one way to engage and take ownership of beloved characters and media. If there's one thing people love to do more than break the rules, it's take control. By taking a character and sexualizing them, it's a sort of effed up way of taking control of the world around you, saying, hey, this is mine now, I made it my own. And finally, number 4. Western society often categorizes sex in limited binary ways. This is especially true if you live in America. Observing the complexity of internet sexuality helps break down stifling molds around sexual orientation and gender identity. We live in a progressive era, and as I already stated, Rule 34 takes the idea of gender and sexuality and just throws it into a blender, creating what might actually be the most diverse subculture on the planet. Yeah, I bet you didn't think about it like that, but it's kind of true. It should also be noted that the internet is a completely open space where any group can take root and spread. The privacy of the internet allows people to explore interests openly without social judgment. Rule 34 exposes just how expansive and eccentric our latent curiosities get when unrestrained. It reveals human sexuality as a boundless spectrum rather than a binary set of norms. The creative experimentation taking place online demonstrates just how varied interests and fantasies can be. And that's what this really comes down to at the end of the day. Unrestrained imagination. Doesn't seem so bad when you put it that way. Oh buddy, I have seen absolute horrors that would make J. Robert Oppenheimer shit his pants. Before we move on from this section, I'd like to read from one of my most trusted sources from this video. Sourced from the American Psychological Association, a brilliant and poignant study titled The Differentiation Between Consumers of Hentai Pornography and Human Pornography. It details a wealth of information on this topic. It's one of the main questions that I hope to answer in this video. Is Rule 34 more or less healthy for you than IRL corn? We'll get into the real meat and potatoes of this question later on, but I'd like to read a few excerpts on why different groups of people seek these things out. Male Rule 34 consumers were more motivated to consume the material for seeking excitement compared to human corn. There was no significant motivational difference in consuming 34 and human pornography across the other types of motivations, including avoiding negative emotions, satisfying sexual curiosity, and facilitating sexual pleasure. The current findings indicate that motivations for consuming different types of pornography could depend on an individual's characteristics. The current findings somewhat support recent findings. Another study found that among the least frequent users of corn in their sample tended to be motivated to use it out of sexual curiosity. Furthermore, moderate frequent users of pornography tended to be motivated by sexual pleasure, while the highest frequent corn users tended to be motivated by both sexual pleasure and sexual curiosity. For the current study, sex may have been one such characteristic that could have influenced motivational differences in pornography use between male and female Rule 34 consumers. Essentially, what that little blurb said is that an individual's frequency of the habit might change with their motivations. The two factors are strongly linked. Moving up the frequency scale, it starts with curiosity, then moves to pleasure, and then both. So there's not one set in stone reason all of us seek it out. There's common reasons, but they differ, and there's different levels of it, based on how deep in the sauce you are. The absolute ubiquity of Rule 34 speaks to the ways in which sexuality has been commodified and turned into content online. In the attention economy, sex sells. I mean, just look at my channel. And Rule 34 artists have built entire careers around this fact. The sheer volume of Rule 34 content is both impressive and a bit dystopian, a sign of how thoroughly the internet has transformed the landscape of desire. You know, as someone who preaches freedom of sexual expression, there are corners of the internet that we were never meant to discover. Unimaginable horrors await you in this video. Don't believe me? Just look at the chapters. Yeah, don't shit the bed before we get there. Just keep an open mind, it'll be fine. Before we really dig into the specific franchises with Rule 34 abound, I'd like to briefly run through this helpful list of the most searched for Rule 34 characters. I think it'll be a good base to establish exactly what Rule 34 looks like to anyone who might be unfamiliar. We'll omit some of the ones I plan on covering later, because they really deserve their own dedicated segments, so the most popular are missing. The top of the list is populated with what I can only assume are anime characters because I don't know any of these names, but they sound very Japanese. But very quickly, you'll find Princess Peach, Link, Tifa, Zelda, Raven, a lot of the names that match up with the tier list that we saw earlier. These are very mainstream characters with Japanese origins, lots of Nintendo characters, but Raven is also thrown into the mix. If you remember, she topped the tier list in the S rank category, with Starfire being not far behind. I don't know if it's more of a Western thing, but we sure do love our goth girls for some reason. In fact, that should be one of the internet rules. Goth girls. Because it's a universal truth. Teen Titans was more of a 2000s show, airing around the same time 4chan was starting to spread its content to other sectors of the internet. If you ask a lot of people on this side of the pond, they'll tell you that Raven or Starfire was their awakening as a kid. The first time they felt feelings they couldn't explain, attachment to a fictional character. This, of course, would inevitably lead to a lot of these 2000s kids finding their way onto 4chan and finding other people worshipping the goth queen. But it should be mentioned that this list also does throw some curveballs at us, which I've come to expect when it comes to this topic. I mean, Christ's sake, we had Jake the dog in that tier list. Yeah, he was D tier, but the fact he even made the list is insane. Wonder Woman, Toy Chica, Tails, all on this list. Okay, Toy Chica, I don't know what you were expecting, Scott. You didn't really even give her a top, and she's wearing, like, those pink bottoms. Five Nights at Freddy's is a whole other video. Yikes. When I set out to make this a video, I didn't want to just talk about Widowmaker getting killed by a 10-foot sausage. I also wanted to include a more scientific approach, you know? I mean, this video is kind of goofy, but it's also a bit serious. 34 has become such a worldwide phenomenon There must be some kind of psychological component. It's universal. Sure, you could make the argument that it's just fun and there's nothing else to it. But I think there's a little more to it than that. Let's take a closer look at that APA article from earlier. One of the ways it proposes we look at this trend is through the lens of psychology and attachment theory. Adult attachment theory is how adults view, behave, and interact with another person romantically. Adult attachment is based on Bowlby's attachment theory, explaining how an individual's early relationships with their caregivers during infancy can influence their future relationships throughout life. There are lots of different models in which one can categorize attachments, but we'll be focusing on the 3-type structure for this video: secure, anxious, or avoidant, with it being possible to score high on both the anxious and avoidant scales. Secure adult attachment is characterized by an adult being comfortable with emotional intimacy in a romantic context. Secure adults are generally comfortable with intimacy and do not have an excessive fear of being abandoned by their partners. Specifically, this type is distinguished by low levels of attachment anxiety and avoidance. It's theorized that adults of this type are more comfortable with intimacy due to having a secure attachment with their caregiver during early life. So in other words, there was a strong emotional presence during childhood. Your parents made an effort to be intimate with each other, and you generally had a very sex-positive household, and they also paid attention to you. Your parents were very open to talking about sex, and if you had any questions, they would sit down with you and take the time to really explain things. Anxious adult attachment, on the other hand, is characterized by being more likely to exaggerate your negative emotions to draw your partner's attention when emotional comfort is needed. It is argued that anxious adults overly rely on their partner because they have an excessive fear of being abandoned by those close to them. If this describes you, you likely had very absent-minded or just absent parents. As a child, you often needed to cry to get attention from them, and you carry this over into your romantic life. Not specifically crying, but you're a drama queen, essentially. You're always expressing what's wrong with you or the world to garner sympathy, because subconsciously, you think you need to do that to get people to care about you. It's hard for you to imagine people caring about you intrinsically. Adults higher on avoidant adult attachment are known to deactivate their attachment system. To a greater extent, avoidant adults repress their negative feelings when faced with distress. It is argued that avoidant adults repress their emotions to distance themselves emotionally and physically from their partner because they prefer emotional independence. This preference for independence has been argued to come from avoidant adults having caregivers whom they believe to be emotionally unreliable and unresponsive towards them. You might have had distant parents who cared for you, like they were around, but they didn't show their emotions as well as secure adults. Unlike the secure adult, they may have had intimacy issues or didn't show their intimacy. They did not make it known to you that they were really being close with each other. They might have prioritized other things like work, or maybe even you. They prioritized your needs over the needs of their partner. You also may have had a very sex-negative household. Don't bring up the topic. I don't want to talk about it with you. This may have led to you having problems with breaking down your own emotional walls with your partner, or even starting to find a partner in the first place. Maybe you prioritize work over intimacy as well, because one of your parents did. The good news is, now that we've identified the main problem, we can work to fix it. But that, my friends, is a future video. This one's about Rainamon getting railed. In recent years, studies have found associations between attachment styles and pornography use. One study found that avoidant and anxious attachment were both positively associated with porn use among adult males. In another study, pornography use correlated with anxious attachment, but not avoidant attachment among adult females. Furthermore, another study found avoidant and anxious adults were more adversely impacted by their pornography use, if they were to engage in it. So not only is it more frequent among my type of attachment, but the effects of it are worse. These studies indicated that pornography might have some influence on how people romantically attach to other people. We have also demonstrated the importance of differentiating different populations of porn consumers, as various groups of people were impacted by it differently. However, previous studies that have investigated the relationship between pornography and attachment have not made it clear if they only investigated human pornography, meaning IRL, or also Rule 34. It's unclear if the link between pornography use and insecure attachment applies to human pornography only, or Rule 34 as well. The researchers of this topic conducted their own study, and the results they found were very surprising. Their first hypothesis states that Rule 34 consumers would score significantly higher on attachment avoidance than non-Rule 34 and non-porn consumers. This turned out to be false, shockingly. When animated, porn did not seem to increase its hold on those kinds of adults. However, the second hypothesis was partially supported. Female Rule 34 consumers scored higher on attachment anxiety than females in the non-porn consumer group. What this means is, women who would typically fit the admittedly broad category of drama queens were more greatly affected by Rule 34 than those who didn't consume porn. Or it would be more accurate to say, the ones who did watch more Rule 34 scored higher on anxiety attachment. There's a possible explanation for this that this paper gives. Pornography could elicit females who are more vulnerable to developing anxious attachment to worry about not meeting their partner's sexual expectations. Because, as we've seen with Rule 34, women's bodies are essentially perfect, and there are no imperfections, worsening body dysmorphia. The current findings are consistent with previous research on the relationship between insecure attachment and pornography use. More specifically, the link between pornography and insecure attachment could also extend to 34, because 34 is also a type of pornography. A 2014 study found that a small significant correlation between problematic pornography use and insecure adult attachment did exist.
Just watching.
Similarly, a 2017 study found that porn use had a negative impact on sexual satisfaction among avoidant and the most anxious attached adults in their sample. In contrast, pornography use did not have a negative impact on sexual satisfaction among secure adults. It may be somewhat reductive to say that secure adults are synonymous with healthy adults. But these findings do seem to point to the fact that some of us are just less affected by the allure of pornography and Rule 34. Neither category seems to pull more than the other, but different types of adults are affected more than others. The study also found a few more notable statistics, such as among college students, they found more anxious attached women than men. Remember, anxious meaning having to exaggerate their negative emotions for attention. It's all very interesting psychology that we could dive even deeper into. This article goes into even more statistics, but I think I've given you enough to chew on. Now, we get to the fun part of the video. Fun question mark. Fun for you, not for me. We are going to be separating Rule 34 by some of its most popular communities. Oh yeah, these pockets of horniness will be individually dissected and analyzed. Where did it come from, and why does it exist? There's 3 that we will be covering in this video. We'll start out with one of the more tame communities by comparison, and work our way up to that dark abyss. I've had my own run-ins with Rule 34, and I'm going to use a certain game franchise to explain the more baseline Rule 34 phenomenon. Pretty vanilla in relation to the other two. Blizzard Entertainment's 2016 video game Overwatch inspired a notable amount of fan-made pornography. The game's distinct and colorful character designs drew the attention of many online content creators, resulting in sexually explicit fan art. Character models were ripped from the beta versions of the game and subsequently spread, edited, and animated all over the internet. Overwatch is a special case because its version of Rule 34 is specific and intentional. Pornographic Overwatch content is created primarily through Valve's Source Filmmaker and Blender. It usually consists of short pieces of video featuring characters such as Tracer, Diva, and Mei. These short GIFs will run in a loop, emphasizing a singular moment of intercourse. This is significant because normal porn can't loop like that. That's why I said it's intentional. It's not a trait that's specific to Overwatch porn, but perhaps it's where it's best exemplified. The artist goes into the project thinking, I want to create a Tracer fuck, specifically for people looking for Tracer getting fucked. This actually could be an argument in favor of Rule 34's enhanced power over your mind. It's allowing you to isolate the intercourse down to your favorite moment, looped for eternity. It's exactly what you want, with nothing else in the scene distracting you. It's why Overwatch compilations are so popular on Cornhub. Overwatch corn, in contrast to other franchises, is pretty vanilla. Like, yeah, there's some Futanari out there, but I'd say most of it is probably made for the straight audience. And the characters in Overwatch are all clearly adult figures. Thank God, there's no issues there. The game is marketed towards a young adult demographic, so nothing geared towards kids is being corrupted here. I mean, you could make the argument that a lot of kids still play Overwatch, but I think most of them are currently stuck on Minecraft and Roblox. Another notable characteristic of Overwatch 34 is its lack of adhering to game lore. The character models are often used as stand-ins for real-world situations and interactions. Like, here's a patient-nurse pornographic scenario, but the character model just happens to be Mercy from Overwatch. Those tend to crop up alongside the compilations. Now this is interesting because Blizzard initially issued cease and desist orders to some prolific creators through an independent security firm, though the game's director described the situation as an inevitable reality of the internet in 2016. I should mention I'm getting this information from the Wikipedia. I trust Wikipedia, but I figured it wouldn't be right if I didn't tell you. Video game journalists have described the abundance of pornographic fanworks as a positive indicator for the game's longevity. Pornographic works of the game remained a topic of discussion long after that game's release, with artists making content of the game's post-launch characters, and Overwatch-related search topics continuing to be popular on Corn websites. Companies like Blizzard often request takedowns of Rule 34 fan art and stories with copyright claims. But legally, these derivative works usually fall under fair use protections. I mean, it makes sense this would happen often. Multi-billion-dollar franchises want control over their brands, but policing Rule 34 is nearly impossible without stifling free speech. Selective enforcement also raises accusations of discrimination. As Overwatch Corn primarily makes use of official character models with appended genitalia, meaning Futanari, various takedown notices have been issued to creators of such content. These notices have been issued by security firm Erdetto, which, according to news outlets, may have been hired by Blizzard to clean up unwanted fan content. Blizzard itself has not yet commented upon the large Overwatch Corn scene, after one creator posted a screenshot of one such takedown notice on a Reddit message board. Other creators started to come together to pressure Blizzard to stop. But not everyone is so quick to take down this artistic expression. Nathan Grayson of Kotaku stated that Overwatch makes for good corn because of its colorful cast of characters with distinct visual styles. Grayson points out that the game features a higher than average number of female characters, many of which wear skin-tight clothing. Grayson wrote that Overwatch pornography is relatively easy to make with Source Filmmaker, the community of which is built around the sharing of assets, including nude models. Many people who create and watch Overwatch pornography have not actually played the game. Blender, another free open-source 3D computer graphics creation tool, is also used by such animators, with one being cited by Kotaku as stating, "Overwatch models are, for the most part, readily available for Blender, and some of them are very beginner-friendly, sort of like the CP units from Half-Life 2. They're everywhere." Some artists have achieved popularity within their online communities, being able to capitalize on their SFM or Blender art and use it as a source of income via Patreon donations. Rule 34 is just worked into the game economy at this point, which is a scary thought, but it's true. Furthermore, when asked about the pornographic fan content, lead designer Jeff Kaplan stated that as someone who is creatively responsible for the franchise, he is concerned and hopes people realize that many children play the game despite the T rating. Regardless, Kaplan stated, "Nobody's trying to step on anyone's freedom of speech or anything like that. Like, I totally love people's creative expression." Kinda based, actually. If you've been around my channel, you'll know that I try to keep a level of self-awareness with my avatar. Obviously, there's Rule 34 of her already. I've seen it, I expected it, and my policy is sort of similar to that. I'm not trying to step on anyone's freedom of expression, and I love that you guys can make very creative stuff like that. I don't even care if you make Rule 34 of candles, my avatar. All I ask is that you don't tag me in it. I'd still love to see it, but I don't want it circling back to my channel, where someone who's not of age may be watching. Both Jim Sterling and VentureBeat's Jeff Grubb described the abundance of fan works of Overwatch, pornographic or otherwise, as a good sign for the game's longevity. The influx of Pokemon-related pornography shortly after the release of Pokemon Go was compared to that of Overwatch. So it seems that Blizzard remains a somewhat litigious enterprise, but not everyone in the company agrees with that sentiment. Interesting, though, how this article mentions another game franchise. Okay, now we're starting to touch that ocean of darkness. Pokemon pornography, also shortened as Pokecorn, can involve either the Pokemon trainers or the Pokemon themselves, and can present interspecies acts between both. The Pokemon can either show human characteristics, known as anthro, or more animalistic features, known as feral. And therein lies the important distinction that I have to make. Pokecorn has been extra controversial over fears of it promoting bestiality. There's gray lines everywhere in this argument, but if you're looking for my opinion, that anthro versus feral distinction is where that line rests. I've unfortunately run into both, but I will say the latter is thankfully far more uncommon. In 1999, what was named the Pokemon Doujinshi incident, doujinshi meaning self-published, an artist was arrested on suspicion of violating Japan's copyright laws for creating a manga featuring erotic acts between Pikachu and Ash Ketchum, the main characters of the Pokemon anime. Obviously problematic because Ash Ketchum is typically depicted as a child. According to the copyright holder Nintendo, the manga was destructive of the Pokemon image. The incident incited media furor, as well as an academic analysis in Japan on the copyright issues around doujinshi. In the late 2010s, live-action corn parodies received media attention, such as the 2015 parody Strokeamon. Oh my god. Are you serious right now? The 2016 Pokemon Go parody by Brazzers, Cornstar Go XXX parody, and the VR corn parody of Pokemon Go, Pokeho Misty. A certain author of gay erotica also released a book called Pokebutt Go, Pounded by 'em All. Look, I disagree with a lot of that, but points for creativity on the names. After the release of Pokemon Go on July 6, 2016, Pornhub reported on the 11th that searches for Pokecorn had increased 136%, with men being 62% more likely to search for the term, and it being 336% more popular among 18 to 24-year-olds. The data showed that Latin America countries were far more likely to search for Pokemon-related corn. Corn website XHamster reported the same day that the most searched terms since the release of Pokemon Go were Pokemon, Pikachu, hentai, and anime. Ucorn said that Pokemon became a more popular search term than corn on their website. Pokemon was more popular than the search term of corn on a corn site. That's what? I mean, it's not surprising. Who goes onto Cornhub and just searches corn in the search bar? Why would you do that? It's like typing Google into Google. So obviously there's something about Pokemon that just really strikes people. But you know what I'm really curious about? And I think what a lot of you are curious about? Which Pokemon specifically top the list? Place your bets. In December 2018, Pornhub Communications Director Chris Jackson said that the top 3 Pokemon-related searches were Gardevoir, Eevee, and
I got a little punny, Batman. I got a little punny.
With top humans being trainers Misty and Serena, as well as Team Rocket's Jessie. According to Vice, the dominance of Gardevoir and Lopunny is reflected on other websites, with Lucario not far behind. Keep going, buddy. You'll get there one day. In June 2023, data compiled on Rule34 websites Rule34.xxx and Sankaku channel showed that Pokemon was the most cornified media franchise, with a large lead after the others. It also showed that the Pokemon themselves were preferred over the trainers, with the top choice being Lucario, followed by Gardevoir. This Wikipedia page specifically notes that fan-made erotica often depicts Gardevoir specifically with human sexual aspects, such as breasts and/or fetish attire. Lucario is a very interesting entry on that list. I think if you were to divide Pokecorn by gay and straight, you'd have Lopunny, Gardevoir, on the straight side, contrasted with Lucario and maybe, I don't know, Incineroar on the gay side. Machamp's probably in that roster somewhere on both sides. I've also personally seen a surprising amount of Weevil, which is interesting. I think the anthropomorphized version of Weevil is just very well designed. The community-inspired memes that became known outside the fandom, such as the Vaporeon copy pasta, a diatribe arguing about sexual compatibility between a Vaporeon and a human, originally posted on 4chan. It goes a little something like this. Hey guys, did you know that in terms of male human and female Pokemon breeding, Vaporeon is the most compatible Pokemon for humans? Not only are they in the field egg group, which is mostly comprised of mammals, Vaporeon are an average of 3 foot 3 inches tall and 63.9 pounds. This means they're large enough to be able to handle human. And with their impressive base stats for HP and access to acid armor, you can be rough with one. Due to their mostly water-based biology, there's no doubt in my mind that an aroused Vaporeon would be incredibly wet. So wet that you could easily bone one for hours without getting sore. They can also learn the moves Attract, Baby Doll Eyes, Captivate, Charm, and Tail Whip, along with not having fur to hide nipples, so would be incredibly easy for one to get you in the mood. With their abilities Water Absorb and Hydration, they can easily recover from fatigue with enough water. No other Pokemon comes close to this level of compatibility. Also, if you can... Vaporeon is literally built for ungodly defense stat plus high HP pull plus acid armor means it can take all day, all shapes and sizes, and still come for more. Yes, I read all of that, and I also had to censor a lot of that, and I will not be linking to that in the description. I don't think has any part in most of this. Pokemon is a special case because while many of these creatures have animalistic features and behaviors in the games, neither of those tend to carry into their pornographic counterparts. Pokemon are always extremely anthropomorphized in Rule 34, and while it's not as vanilla as some other groups, it's not the worst. The only real problem I see it having is it's from an IP that's mostly geared towards kids, which is obviously a big problem. Not as big as this next one though, because holy hell, there's one more category we have to cover, and I fear this might be the thing to do my channel in if I'm not careful. The censoring will have to be heavy in this next bit. It is time to face true darkness. There are times when Rule 34 shows its true and terrifying power. In this case, it's so terrifying that there isn't even a Wikipedia page dedicated to it, unlike Overwatch and Pokemon, because we want to avoid talking about it that much. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, is a show for children that has a scary abundance of Rule 34 attached to it. Like, it's insane and incredibly disheartening. While the ages of the characters in the show are a bit more ambiguous, how do you tell the age of a pony? The show is most definitely geared towards children. And look, do you think I want to talk about this? I have to bring this up because it's so prevalent on sites like Cornhub and Next Videos. I absolutely will not get into the specifics of MLP corn, but I can try to explain its existence. This goes beyond Futanari, okay? There's a lot of it in this kind of corn, but it's very much farther beyond that, into things that are very more taboo. The My Little Pony phenomenon might be explained by the adjacent brony community, an outlier in internet culture where middle-aged men find comfort and enjoyment in the show. On the surface, I don't have anything wrong with bronies at all, you know? You're allowed to find comfort in whatever you want. If it brings you a feeling of innocence and joy, that's fine, I don't care. But with every positive group, there's bound to be some individuals that are there for the wrong intentions. Bronies probably deserve a video of their own, but this overlap between them and consumers of this brand of corn might be able to explain its existence. It's a community of adults creating Rule 34 of characters that have meaning to them, with no intention of reeling in the actual audience of the show. This is the most lighthearted explanation. I'm sure the actual intentions of this niche community vary from artist to artist. But if we're aiming on the most lighthearted explanation, this is it. And one more thing, it's not my intention to shame anyone who's a part of these communities at all. I'm simply an outside observer trying to understand why things are the way they are. I'm speaking to a hopefully open-minded audience here, where we can talk about these things without immediate judgment. And now that we've gone over each of these communities, I'd like to attempt to answer the question of why? These are 3 of the biggest Rule 34 communities. So what's the commonality between them? After thinking about this for a long time, I think it's the diversity aspect. Really think about it, because the more you think about it, the more sense it starts to make. Overwatch, for example, it touts itself as having a diverse cast of characters. Pokémon has some of the most diverse characters out there, and MLP is almost designed around the fact that they're all different. It's the creativity that is able to flow out of these franchises that makes them so susceptible to pornography interpretations. What does this say about human desire and creativity? Maybe this speaks to our innate desire to discover, to invent. Media with diverse characters such as these simply gives us the materials that we need to create pornography of any interest, any skin or fur color, any pairing of characters of any physical stature, any emotional state. I think Rule 34 is a modern expression of humanity's desire to conquer, to go where no man has gone before, to find every corner of existence and make it ours by anthropomorphizing it, by making it inherently human. That's why these are the big 3, because they're so diverse. It's literally the perfect fuel for the Rule 34 fire. Now, let's get to the ultimate question I set up ages ago. Is Rule 34 more or less healthy than watching regular porn? It's been a major subject of debate in the comments section of my original porn addiction video. And trust me, it gets complicated. As a basis, researchers have found that exposure to pornography could influence different populations of people differently. According to a meta-analysis by Ferguson and Hartley, few studies have found that exposure to pornography was linked with varying influences on behavior. For example, consuming porn influencing sexually aggressive behavior. Furthermore, cross-sectional and longitudinal studies have found males who believed pornography as immoral, but nevertheless consumed it, were more susceptible to symptoms of depression. However, this was not the case for females. Despite possible indications of pornography having different influences on different populations, researchers have not clearly differentiated Rule 34 from IRL porn. Some who struggle with compulsive 34 say that it is worse than regular porn because of the hardcore nature of the themes, such as the male characters having extremely large phalluses, impossibly large, and the female bodies being ultra hypersexualized. Rule 34 can also depict sexual acts that are biologically uncommon or just impossible more easily than human pornography. For example, 34 often features fantasy creatures like giant demons with inhuman-sized genitals having intercourse with human-looking characters. 34 is also commonly consumed through various media, including virtual reality, 2D animation, 3D animation, ASMR, video games, and doujinshi. There are also valid concerns about Rule 34 featuring real people, such as celebrities or public figures, because Rule 34 does technically include media that is live action. You search up Star Wars corn, Lord of the Rings corn, those actors are getting wrapped into that. The rise of deepfakes in non-consensual pornography has only added fuel to this fire. While most Rule 34 communities have strict rules against content featuring real people, the line between fiction and reality can sometimes blur. However, proponents argue that Rule 34 is a form of free expression and that policing fantasy and fiction is a slippery slope. They point out that adult content has always existed and that trying to suppress it is a futile venture. In this view, the solution is to create a more positive and diverse erotic content environment, not to shame or censor sexual expression entirely. Now, from my own comment section, a clear argument has arisen. Rule 34 is clearly fake, while regular porn is harder to discern. Our brains are more able to disconnect from it because we know for a fact that it's fiction. Also, outside of the common problem of unpaid voice actors and artists, an argument can be made that the IRL corn industry has a lot more abuse than cartoon corn. It seems that the answer is unfortunately still up for debate, but I'll leave you with this. The current study found that individuals who consumed 34 in the past year did not seem to differ from other pornography consumer types in terms of their attraction towards humans and their desire for a human romantic relationship. However, Rule 34 consumers did differ from other pornography consumer types in terms of how much they perceived anime characters physically and romantically, obviously. Therefore, future studies are encouraged to differentiate Rule 34 from human pornography. Now, as for my personal experience with Rule 34, I haven't exactly been shy in this video about what I've seen over the years. I too had unrestricted access to the internet at a very young age, and I do what kids do, explore. But, shockingly, for me, my first experience with pornography was not digital. It was a magazine at my local barbershop, with a nude beach model. The intensity of that first feeling is something I don't think I'll ever forget, or be able to replicate. In comparison with what I see now, it was definitely vanilla, nothing special. But back then, it absolutely broke my brain. That was the catalyst for everything that came after. Not long after, got my first iPod, and the rest is history. Pretty soon, I ran into some vanilla Rule 34, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought, kinda weird, but whatever. It was only until years later where I wondered whether or not I could draw it myself. Did it take off for me? I drew it in secret. God forbid anyone find my Rule 34. I think I threw it away, but ugh. I never drew characters from pop culture though, so it's not really Rule 34. I drew what I knew how to draw, my own characters. Flash forward to today, and I still do not safe for work of my OCs from time to time. The drawings themselves aren't particularly good, but it's more about the incredibly exciting process of making the art rather than the destination. Sometimes when I'm done, I'll just delete it, because I don't need to see it again. It was more about the journey. One time, I became really depressed because my art wasn't as good as a Rule 34 artist that I followed. But then after a while I realized my art isn't made for the same purpose. So there was nothing to be sad about, you know? Why would I compare my painting to a sculpture? Also, you can approach not safe for work art from two places. One, a place of apathy. It's purely for work and I find no stimulation from these drawings. Or you could approach it from a place of excitement and find immense value in the process of drawing characters in a certain way, even if you're not making money off of it. I fall into that second category. Here's the thing, I don't think Rule 34 is the healthiest of all activities to do, obviously. Just like regular corn, I think it can be used as a healthy sexual expression, but only in certain situations and in certain mindsets, i.e. not as a crutch that replaces actual intimacy. I don't even care if you draw Rule 34 of Candles, my avatar. I've already said this, because she is not me and she is not real. The reason my policy is the way it is because of situations like Overwatch. The more you try to suppress it, the worse it gets. Again, I even draw Rule 34 myself sometimes. It can be a good reference if you're trying to learn anatomy and how to draw certain complicated poses. But when I peer into my potential future, I can see engaging with Rule 34 and not safe for work art with a transparency with a long-time committed partner. This establishes a lot of trust in the relationship and can serve to enhance time in the bedroom. Outside of that very specific reality, I would not like to continue the practice of drawing and engaging with Rule 34 deep into my adult life, because then I fear it will cripple my chances at intimacy with someone real. And that's my decision. Doesn't mean it needs to be your decision. If the solution to this problem is to allow freedom of sexual expression with self-policing of content we deem goes too far, like feral Pokémon, maybe having internet rules isn't such a bad thing after all. The point is, everyone has their own beliefs, mindsets, upbringings, and journeys to make in life. I can't judge whether or not engaging with Rule 34 is right for you because everyone is different. Consider what I've shown you today and make that decision for yourself. This was a big video for me. Corn is something I've obviously struggled with a lot before, and this specific type of corn is something I've especially had issues with. If you ask me, Animated corn is worse on the individual, while IRL corn is worse on the industry itself. So it's just a matter of preference, really. Isn't everything? Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I don't know if it's going to be monetized or not, but it hardly matters to me. Getting the occasional YouTube paycheck is nice and all, but I want to play this game fairly. You know, YouTube, if you think it's too much, I understand and accept full demonetization if that's what you choose. All I can hope for is that it's not blocked or age restricted entirely, because I want to inform people on these topics. I think it's very important, and I think it can help them not repeat the same mistakes that I made growing up. You can join the Discord if you want. We're nearing 1,000 members at the time of writing this.
Who are you people?
But you do need proof of date of birth if you'd like access to certain channels, like not safe for work art. Gotta be 18 or older, no exceptions. You can also follow me on Instagram at lavenderpaints1. I post more of my safer work art over there. Thank you guys for all the amazing fan art. You are some fantastic artists. I love you all. Good night.